Try this again. We have sound, and we've got a mic, and all the things. And I'm usually pretty loud, so I was kind of surprised I have nowhere to mic. My name is Michelle Nunemaker. I am the System of Care Administrator with the Division of Behavioral Health, and I came into my role about 2 years ago, which was right at about the time we were starting to plan for 988. And as I'm sure some of you all know, when you're new and your plate is empty, you get lots of things given to you. And so I was lucky enough to get the 988 project and wear the interim emergency administrator hat. So who's heard of 988? Yay, that makes me really happy. Okay, because I have done these and have gone out, and there are lots of people who still haven't heard about 988. So happy to share with you all. I'm going to talk with you guys today about the inception of 988, kind of some of the data that we have, talk a little bit about mobile crisis, and talk about where we're going with 988. And this is like, feel free, please, to stop if you have questions. Go ahead and stop me. Love to have a conversation. So on July 16th of last year, we're coming up on our 1-year anniversary, which is really exciting. The 1-800-273-TALK, so that's Suicide Prevention Lifeline, that transitioned over to 988. You'll see the someone to call, someone to respond, and somewhere to go is linked with 988. That was a change. We added, the legislation added with 988. It became more than just a suicide prevention lifeline. It's now a behavioral health crisis lifeline. So any kind of mental health, substance use, anything like that. And 988 is a 3-pronged approach. It's someone to call, someone to respond, and somewhere to go. So just a little bit about the implementation and the history. 988 Nebraska is ran out of Boys Town in Omaha. They were the provider for that for the suicide prevention lifeline. They were that call center prior to 988. They were accredited and everything, and it just made sense to continue working with them because they had the infrastructure and the training and whatnot already in place. Plus, they were part of bringing up the Nebraska Family Helpline, which is out of Boys Town, and they were involved in System of Care, which brought up youth mobile crisis. Nebraska was one of the few states to actually bring up their youth mobile crisis before bringing up their adult mobile crisis. You can see up here some of our implementation stakeholders. We worked very closely with UNL's Public Policy Center, DHHS, Boys Town, Public Service Commission. We had NAMI, various providers. I feel like I'm echoing. Okay, stay on this side, maybe. Okay. And so what we did is we had a implementation plan that we developed, and through that plan we solicited different stakeholders to come and be a part of some of the different work groups because we wanted this to be a full Nebraska. Really wanted to hear from the folks who were already doing some of this work and the folks who would be doing this work, and so we brought them on with us. We had an advisory team, we did data and performance metrics, we have a marketing team, that statewide referral repository, so that's our database of services, technology and training and education. And so these teams all came together and provided recommendations and that we took and implemented when 988 became active. So I talked about it's a 3-prong approach. So that first prong is someone to call. Like I said, they're up in Boys Town. 988, you can text directly 988, or you can go online if you don't have access to a phone. If you do have access to internet, you can chat through the Lifeline webpage. We highly recommend texting as opposed to chatting, because if it bounces to something else or you accidentally closed a window or something like that, that chat would be disconnected. Versus like a text, it's just like you're texting, whomever, that conversation can continue. So 988 is staffed, it's 24/7, and it is staffed with trained crisis counselors. We do have licensed practitioners who supervise the crisis counselors and who also is the program director. And their role is to assess the safety of the individual, what's going on, try and de-escalate that crisis. They're going to triage your safety plan with them. They'll give them referrals and resources. So I talked about that statewide, that big database. And if the caller would like to utilize mobile crisis response, they will also activate that. Now that's new as well, because previously on that suicide prevention lifeline, there was no activation of mobile crisis response. The only response would have been law enforcement or EMS as needed. I want to talk to you a little bit about 988 in the sense that it's not exactly like 911. When you call 988, you will not get a person like you do with 911. There is a recording, and that next, what I was trying to work on getting that video up for you all, is a recording of what that sounds like. But it takes about a minute and 10 seconds. And we like to educate folks about this because as you either are calling or you're working with individuals who might call, we want you to let them know that this is the process, that you're not going to get a 911, how can I help you? And the reason for that is the technology is all done through Vibrant Behavioral Health, which is our big overall federal folks. And there is a press 1 to connect to the Veterans Crisis Line. So any of those veterans, we want to get them connected specifically with those crisis services. We also have a Spanish subnetwork, so if they press 2, they'll get connected to the Spanish crisis line. New is the press 3, which will connect to the Trevor Project. So it says on there, folks who are individuals who identify as LGBTQ and are 25 and younger. And then it'll say remain on the line and you'll get connected with your crisis center. The way that works is right now we don't have geolocation like 911 does. So like 911 knows exactly what address somebody's calling from or those kinds of things. 988, we don't have that yet. We are working on it. All of the states have really are really passionate about wanting to have that access so that there can be quicker support to folks who are calling 988. So the way it works right now is it's based off of your area code. So anybody with a 402, a 308, or that 531? That's a new one to me. That 531 number will get routed to Boys Town. And now, of course, you may live in another state or somebody may be living in another state who still has a Nebraska area code. They will get routed to Boys Town, and then what Boys Town will do is they'll work with that caller to get them connected with their local crisis center. So they have a list of all of the different crisis centers and those kinds of things. So the goal is always to get folks connected within either their community or their state so that they have access to resources. So on this next slide, I'm going to go ahead and play that video for you. So you can hear what it sounds like.
You've reached the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. We are here to help. Para español, oprime el número 2. To reach the Veterans Crisis Line, if you are a U.S. veteran or service member or are calling about one, press 1. To connect to specialized support for LGBTQ+ people under the age of 25, press 3. Otherwise, please remain on the line while we route your call to a Lifeline crisis counselor. Your call may be monitored and recorded for quality assurance purposes.
So this is where it's being routed right now based upon what that area code is.
Please stay on the line while your call is directed to an available responder.
Nebraska 98, how can I help you?
When it becomes unchecked, it becomes harmful.
Okay. So like I said, it's about a minute 10, a minute 15 seconds. So what we've seen since we started in 988, we have seen about a 76% increase of calls on a daily basis. Prior to 988 going live, when it was still that suicide prevention lifeline, for the calendar year of 2021, there were about 8,800 total calls. As you can see here, we're hitting close to 1,500 calls a month. So we blew that 8,800 number out of the water, I think, within the first 4 or 5 months. But that's great, because that means that people are calling, which is exactly what we want them to do. Just wanted to give you just kind of what that call volume looks like, and our expectation of Boys Town is that they do have an answer rate of 90% or above. They're doing a great job. They've been 94 and up, almost this whole time, so we really appreciate them. Just some volume trends, and this is through March here. So that one has a 77%. Just so you can see kind of the trend of calls and where we had our peaks, which was interesting that we had that kind of that October, November-ish range, and then kind of dropped down a little bit and then peaked back up, because normally we see it, that high peak in that December, January range. And then this here is just kind of our digital volume, just to give you an idea of how many texts and chats. It's still going kind of slow right now, only at about 17 texts and chats a day. But we do have it fully staffed and it's there, and I really think it's just kind of getting that word out, letting people know that you can text directly.
And then I want you to think about the second.
And then just to give you an idea across the state, kind of where our calls are coming in from. So Region 6, that Omaha area, high percentage, which makes sense given the metro area there. Region 5 comes in next. Again, makes sense with it being that Lincoln area. And then as you can see the other regions, those unknown are folks who didn't disclose where they were from. All the information that callers give is purely, at their discretion to disclose. So we do track how many we don't know. And then this is here just to give you kind of an idea of who is calling. The majority of our calls are for adults. We're getting about 76% adults, 15% youth, third party at about 6%, and then 2% is we don't know kind of who they are. Again, maybe didn't want to disclose to us. Oftentimes the adults, they're either calling about themselves or they are calling about somebody else. They may be calling about their youth, or they may be calling about a spouse or a sibling or a parent, or a friend or a coworker who needs some support. And then just kind of our age breakdowns here. Highest level we're seeing in that 30 to 39%, which again makes sense. Seeing quite a bit in that 18 and under, which we're really happy about. We really want to, it's really great to hear or to see that youth are reaching out for help. And then we're also seeing a high percent in that 60 to 69 range. Folks who know about, like you all that know about, like, are these numbers surprising to you given these age ranges and kind of what we know about statistics? It's like our three highest groups, right, that are calling are 18 and under, mid-30s, and then 60 to 69. So I'm happy to see that those who are at higher risk are calling. Those are our high numbers of folks that are calling. And then just to give you an idea of where in the state, those white counties or counties we haven't had calls from yet. And then,
could you go back to that?
You betcha.
Sorry.
No worries. I know, it's kind of small.
Okay.
And then the next one here is just to give you an idea of what people are calling about, kind of what are those codes, kind of what is that underlying reason for calling. We are still seeing about a third of the calls are suicide related, so folks are still accessing 988 for suicidal ideations or attempts. And then we see the next one there being that just that ongoing support, so referrals and resources. We do have quite a few folks who they're not quite ready to access services, but they're willing to talk to somebody through like 988 or another warm line or a crisis line. And so we do have quite a few repeat callers, and for them, that's their coping mechanism right now. It's what they're comfortable with. So that's kind of they too also fall into that ongoing support.
What is that? Excuse me. What's that? Goodness. What's the first column, the tall one?
So that's suicidal ideation. So still seeing, like I said, about a third, if not more, of our calls are still for that suicidal ideation. All right, and then just what are some of the referrals? Just wanted to give you guys an idea of what some of those referral sources are. Mental health continues to be our highest, which is, again, makes sense given what this line is for. Substance use coming in and next, and then just some additional supports. It's kind of what folks are calling for. And then these are the referrals that those crisis counselors are making. So as you can see here, they're still making quite a few of those mental health referrals, about 34%. And then those non-therapeutic supports. So there's lots of additional mental health services and substance use services out there that aren't necessarily therapeutic. It also could just be basic needs types of things. Parenting support tends to be a big one. So it's just kind of that. It's the nice thing again about 98 is it's that bigger pot of addressing various topics, and they have resources. So that's someone to call. I'm going to move on a little bit to someone to respond. So we do provide mobile crisis response, both in person, by phone, or by telehealth. When we very first kicked off, probably those first 2 weeks of 988, we saw a lot of people declining mobile crisis. Mobile crisis is a voluntary service. Of course, we want folks to want to engage with the mobile crisis team, welcome them, to wherever they're at or work with them. And so we saw a lot of folks saying, no, I'm not okay with that. I'm not quite sure I want people in my home, which totally makes sense. And so we added that phone and telehealth and really saw those activations increase. People were much more comfortable if they had those, if they could do it either by phone or by telehealth. The other reason we do have that is we've got some very rural areas of our state, and it could take a crisis responder a couple hours to respond versus being able to respond right away, either by phone or by telehealth. Something new with our crisis response teams and with 988 is that adding that voice of lived experience. So we really want to see all of our mobile crisis teams adding a trained peer support specialist to the team. We'd like to see that person be one of those first responders and being able to engage with the person. We do have some standardized trainings and expectations. We're working on more of a, I haven't quite decided yet if it's going to be like an academy or if it's just going to be kind of a cohort of classes. But we are looking at having high evidence-based, best practices, really solid training for those mobile crisis teams, and we want that to be consistent across the state so that anybody who's getting services in Scottsbluff is also getting the same types of services in Lincoln with mobile crisis. Also, we want our teams to be competent and prepared to go out and work and deal with crisis. Because really the view and the point of 988 is to not have law enforcement be responding to behavioral health crises. Let law enforcement go do their job, let the behavioral health professionals go do their job. Really want to try and decrease criminalization of behavioral health issues. And so the mobile crisis teams, they are required to do post-crisis follow-up. So they are to reach out to the person within the first 24 hours and attempt to make 3 contacts within 72 hours. And it's really a contact with them of how are you doing? If they did a safety plan, is your safety plan still working? If they connected them with services, were you able to access services? How are you, and it's that next piece. It's more than just a one and done. It's we want to get folks engaged who may need some ongoing services. This might be that very first point of contact for them, getting them engaged with ongoing services. And then, of course, there's that referral for services.
I grew up in a home where...
Then on this side, I'm just going to give you some numbers here. So like I said, we offer, and they did some decline. So we're seeing more declines than activations, but I really think that that's just getting the word out there about what it is. That mobile crisis is here to help. It's not here, we want it to be non-law enforcement response, those kinds of things, so that it's actually there to help. So I think it's just going to take some time. Despite offering both the phone and telehealth, as you can see, the majority of folks will agree to it in person, so that community contact. And then coming up close next is the phone. The other thing I've heard from different providers over the last year is what will happen is it might start as a phone, I'm only willing to talk to you over the phone. And then as they're talking with them, they get them to agree to do that in-person contact. And so again, it's de-escalation and it's building that rapport. And then here, just to give you an idea of where the activations are coming from, Region 6 and Region 5, so that Omaha-Lincoln area again. And then as we talked about earlier, the majority of callers are for adult, which is fine because the Nebraska Family Helpline can also activate mobile crisis response for youth. So if a parent calls the helpline and 988 are cross-trained. They are the same crisis counselors that are answering both of those lines. So they're skilled and trained and able to get the family and the youth connected with the services that they need. So emergency interventions, there are times where law enforcement or EMS needs to be activated. And those is when, like talked about, they assess for safety. If an individual is found to be unsafe, typically that's they have already potentially attempted to die by suicide or in the process of attempting to die by suicide. And it's past being able to do a safety plan or get somebody else involved in EMS. And so emergency medical services or law enforcement has to get activated. But what we're seeing is that that's only happening where it's just law enforcement or emergency medical services is only happening about that 3% of the time. The 3.73, that addition of that 0.7, that's math, but that 0.7%, those are those mobile crisis activations. And so what that tells us is that about more than 96% of the time, those trained crisis counselors are de-escalating those calls and getting those callers connected with the services that they need. So it just goes to show just kind of like their training, all of the access to services that they have, and just that they're able to also really help and de-escalate just through the phone. And then we broke down again just where those activations are taking place at. So that was somebody to respond, and I believe there's another session about mobile crisis. So if you want more information on those mobile crisis teams, there's another session.
Yes.
And then the last prong of 988 is that vision of somewhere to go. So somewhere to go, that is really truly those brick and mortar locations. Crisis stabilization units, we only have like 3 in the state, 1 in Omaha, 1 in Grand Island, Hastings area, and 1 in Lincoln. And so we really want to see some sort of crisis stabilization unit in all of the regions across the state. Really trying to build up those community-based services in their area so that we can keep folks in their home and in their area. That's the goal. How can we help you de-escalate the crisis, get you connected with supports, and keep you in your home? We really want to decrease those emergency protective custody holds for mental health, see if we can really get folks connected where they are. So some of the things that we're working on with that is a bed registry and some same day or next day assessment, outpatient and medication management appointments. This is where folks would be able to see, okay, I know that this provider in Lincoln has an appointment open on Tuesdays and Wednesdays and Thursdays at 11 a.m. I'm going to take Tuesday's appointment for, Mr. Smith. And so it's right there. Again, it helps just kind of keep that ball rolling of here I am to help you. We've decreased your, we've de-escalated the crisis. Now let's get you connected with services, and I've got you an appointment tomorrow, or I have an appointment for you today. Working on some mental health and substance use crisis respite for both youth and adults, and then some peer-run crisis respite or hospital diversion. So we have like Kia House here in Lincoln is considered a peer-run crisis respite. So yeah, so it's going to take some time. We know that piece of 988, that somewhere to go, is just something in our state we're just going to have to take some time to build. And then the next slide I have for you, I just spoke really fast, you guys, I'm sorry. This slide here, I'll let y'all read it. I'm not going to read it to you, but it's been really interesting because these are callers who've called back with feedback about their experiences with 988. Unsolicited, typically didn't see that happen with the Suicide Prevention Lifeline, but it's just been nice to see folks kind of call back. And we've had some other ones, but here are just kind of our latest ones. The thing though that I like the best about it is it really helps to see that it can be for more than just suicide prevention. Just saying Happy Easter, and he appreciates the services. One caller apologizing because they felt they were abusive to the crisis counselor, you know. I mean, it can just be a number of different reasons that people are calling. So what we have learned that crisis is messy. There's never a script, and it differs from person to person. So it sometimes is, I know for a fact there was one of the crisis counselors was working with an individual for almost 2 hours just by text. That was the only engagement they were willing to do at that time. And then they moved to phone engagement, and then they agreed to mobile crisis. And so, I mean, by the time that all happens, they're 4, 5, 6 hours involved with this individual. Other times it's just we can get them de-escalated. Other times it's they just need an ear or somebody to listen to them. So we just don't ever know what it's going to be until that person calls. Sometimes, like we talked about this, people don't want services. They're not there, they're not ready. They want to talk. We're working with a provider in the western part of the state who has a caller who calls pretty regularly. They've already worked kind of with that person and set up a safety plan and whatnot with that person, and so they want to share this information with 988 so those crisis counselors kind of know what's going on already and can get them connected back or help them follow their safety plan or their wellness plan. And then we do also have the mobile crisis teams call back and just kind of give it a disposition of that call. You know, was the person able to stay in their home? Did they have to go to a hospital? You know, those kinds of things. But just so that we can keep track of that, so that if that caller calls back again, well, we know last week, because a lot of times it's like a couple days in a row, you know, those kinds of things. And so it's being able to say, hey, we just talked with you on Monday, and you worked with such and such provider, and you guys did a safety plan. How's that safety plan going? If you're calling me, maybe it's not working. What do we need to do to tweak it? So it's just that continuity, I think, just helps, because that's something that we're finding is as we go into these partnerships are key. That's that big piece. It's that partnership between the providers, 988, and the state to just make sure that they have what they need and callers are getting what they need, and that we're all staying in communication with one another and working together. And so we also still have monthly implementation team meetings, which consists of some different stakeholders. And so we talk about what's working well, what went well this month for you, what are some areas that we can work on, what is, you know, it just helps us to continue to talk about how do we make 988 better, what's working, what's not working. And then every community is different, which we know, like I said, we talked about, you know, just we want to train all of the mobile crisis responders, but we do recognize that there's different parts of the state and different communities have different things going on already. So what's happening next for us? Our goal is to expand our marketing campaign. Our marketing has really been at the grassroots level. When the FCC rolled this out, every state was in a different phase of rolling out 988, you know, just kind of depending on what the state already had in place. And so they didn't want to bombard states that were still building their system. So they didn't do a big national campaign as a kickoff. They are starting to do more national campaigns, and there will continue to be more national campaigns that come out. We are focusing, we've done there's been some public service announcements, which if you've heard them, then my voice is familiar. We've had some commercials. We do have on our 988 Nebraska website, we've got social media posts. That video I played for you is on our website. We've got posters on there and some of those different things that you are more than welcome to take and to print, share, post, kind of however you want to do that. SAMHSA's website also has some materials that you can order. They've got some magnets and some other different things that you can order. We're We're also working with Public Policy Center and Nebraska Department of Education to get some posters and some additional materials developed, and same with Region 5 systems. So hoping to see more of that come out, but it's just going to take a little bit of time. We talked about we really need to expand those crisis services in our community. So really that's somewhere to go. And then we're working on simplifying some of our data collection. And so we've got 3 different systems, and those 3 systems don't talk to each other. So we're trying to figure out how to get these 3 systems to either talk to each other or make sure that the information is getting shared where it needs to go. So still some work to do with that. And then we did receive a grant through NASHBID. That's Association of Substance and Mental Health. I don't remember what all the letters stand for. I can Google it for you though. But we're working with them to help. Through that grant, that's the grant that we're utilizing to build the training program. So what we're doing kind of right now with that is we've brought our mobile crisis providers together and have talked about the training. What do they see as being required training? What do they see as maybe not being required training? What are areas that they need support with training in? And so really trying to, again, like I said, to build that comprehensive training package or training model for our mobile crisis teams. We also received grants to help bring up 988. So 988, the call centers, the funding, part of their funding does come from a grant. And they have continued to provide us with some different grants to continue to support and bring up our call center. So we're very thankful for that. And it's great too because it has different aspects and pieces and activities, that we have to do. One of our areas that we are still working on building is our connection with 911. So right now, 988 will warm transfer a call to 911, but 911 is not quite ready to warm transfer calls to 988. And I think it's just going to take time, education, being able to show like this would be a good call, and so that's what we're working on right now is bringing folks together to talk about what might be those calls or some criteria of those calls that maybe we take that and transfer that over to 988 as opposed to 911. Like I said, I talked really fast. I didn't realize how fast I talked. Yes, go for it.
Do you have an average time that an interaction lasts with or how long it takes for a crisis to be?
Yeah, so the average call length is about 15 minutes, but again, that's that average. It's like 15 to 20 minutes, and that's depending on folks who may have a longer time versus folks who may have a shorter time. As far as the mobile crisis and those contacts, I don't have an average on that one just because, again, it's so individualized and it can be quite, it could be an all-day affair if needed. I think you have.
Yeah. So when you talked about peer support, is there a provider that is across the state providing it? Is it just regionally different providers that are providing that peer support? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So our funding goes out to the Division of Behavioral Health, takes the funding and it goes out to the regions. The regions contract with providers to provide that mobile crisis response. So the expectation is of that provider either to bring on peer support or to work with a local agency with peer support. I know in Omaha, Lutheran Family Services is bringing on their own peer support, and it's utilizing their own peer support folks to accompany their mobile crisis teams.
So obviously this is really important work, but if somebody wanted to be part of your team, what is the kind of experience that you have to have or the background that you have to have to form part of the team for 98?
It's just part of it is just going to depend on kind of what position you're looking at. If you want to do mobile crisis, I can get you connected with the different providers. We're encouraging that they move away from only having licensed individuals respond. There's a lot of folks who aren't licensed, who have a lot of experience in this field, who can do a great job. We also know that, and this is nationwide, behavioral health folks are hard to come by. And so this is another way to look at how can we be creative with staffing. So we do have some that are just direct support, so just requires a high school and some lived experience or a bachelor's degree, so it just kind of depends. Crisis counselors do not have to be licensed, I believe they have to have a bachelor's degree. And then there are some different licensed folks, so it just kind of depends on, like I said, just what area you're interested in, kind of what role you're interested in. Yes?
So I have one question. It's because I work with parents, and sometimes they talk about their struggles, the issues at home, and some of them are really depressed, and they want to talk with someone. And we hear about this phone number before, and I know that it asks, the service in Spanish available for them. But they somehow, when they talk with the specialists, they are looking to receive the help outside. I don't know if you are like in a partnership with other organizations, like to work with the Latino families, because some of them, like, to be honest, don't have access to, for example, insurance, and they are afraid, like, I need to pay for the service. I don't want to, make a phone call for that reason. So it's just a question.
Yeah, so if it's more kind of that parenting support, I would actually say call the Nebraska Family Helpline. And I'll give you guys that number. I should know it off the top of my head. I apologize that I don't.
It's fine.
And the reason being, because they will, so the Nebraska Family Helpline is one where you will talk to a person. It won't go through that automated. It's separate from 988. But they have the same access to resources, the same crisis counselors, and does include various folks who speak different languages and things like that. So I think that might help families a little bit more. It's free, it's for anybody, it's kind of anything they're experiencing with their kids. It is a lot of times, I know, because I oversee that program as well, but I know a lot of times the phone calls are for just kind of resources in their community. So if it's more kind of the resources and supports, I would say call the Family Helpline, quite honestly. Or don't press 2 and stay on with the 988. Those services are free. Mobile crisis response is if the person has Medicaid, it may be billed to Medicaid. Otherwise, the division picks up all the costs for mobile crisis response. Those community-based services, though, those will depend on either insurance or sliding fee scales or financial eligibility. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So, when Boys Town gets the call, and let's say it's a Lincoln number, is Centerpoint the only one who has a crisis line here in Lincoln, or are there other agencies? Or do you guys even pass it to?
So we wouldn't even pass it to Centerpoint.
Okay.
That number is separate. And we've kept all of the different local crisis lines and warm lines in activation because people are used to calling those. And so as long as those are being utilized, we want to make sure that they're still there for folks. But if anybody calls 988 specifically, they will talk to Boys Town. Anywhere, any of the 402, the 308, or the 531 zip codes. Centerpoint is the mobile crisis responder for the Lincoln area. So that's where Centerpoint would come in. What other questions do y'all have? Well, see, look, I get you out of here about 2 minutes early. There's my contact information. Please, if you have questions or think of anything else, please don't hesitate to reach out. If you just Google 988 Nebraska and go to the DHHS website, all of that stuff that I talked about was on there, the toolkit. We also have our implementation plan is on there, so if you're interested in what that looked like, we have our meeting, the recommendations from those different stakeholder groups that I talked about, their information is on that site. So that's where we'll just continue to keep adding info about 980. And then SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse Mental Health SA.
Service Administration.
Thank you. They have a ton on their website too about 988, and we're unable to have swag, but SAMHSA's got some pretty cool swag.
And all of it's switched over to 988.
Uh-huh. and it's all free. All right, thank you guys so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.